old for video games?
You have failed.
The same way, I will destroy you. And my friend is truly dead.
Now this is pod racing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Jedi Council and the Graying Jedi podcast. I'm UrzaMaster. Joining me as always, Lord Uther and Jedi Master Psyllium Maas. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see everybody back at the Jedi Temple. We're talking The Mandalorian Season 1. We are 2 episodes deep, about to talk episodes 3 and 4. The Sin and, refresh my memory, Psyllium Maas. The Sanctuary. The aptly titled episodes thus far have brought us back to the Star Wars universe. As we discussed last time, it really feels like Star Wars. It's got that sort of archetypal Western but space theme going on, and I'm excited to talk today about Mando and the child as they embark upon their strange journey. So I'm not going to delay us any further. Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, walk us through the background on these episodes.
Thank you, Jedi Master, UrzaMaster. Thank you, Jedi Master Lord Uther. And thanks to you, Graying Jedi fans in this galaxy and those far, far away. We are on episode 20 of the Graying Jedi, so a little bit of a shout out and an anniversary. Can't wait till we're old enough to vote, but you can catch up on all previous 19 episodes. Just click that subscribe button, check out the archive on our YouTube pending rebrand. Also check out our website, or still in construction website for pending rebrand, where you'll find bonus content, musings of our contributors, secrets and lies, so much that we have to offer you here in 2024 as part of the pending rebrand family, which grows more and more by the day. So we know that you're out there, we know that you're being fruitful and multiplying, and we are just happy to have you along. Be sure to hit us back with feedback, commentary, criticism, fashion notes, anything that might come to mind. Let us know you're out there. Rattle our cages. Make us engage with you on all things Star Wars, original trilogy, prequel trilogy, sequel trilogy, streaming, and so forth. And we're actually going to take 5 minutes here before we begin our episode dissertation, because there was some pretty big news in the Star Wars universe since our last episode, and I wanted to get the Council's reactions to what was announced. First and foremost, Ahsoka Season 2 is officially in development and planning to go before the cameras at some point later this year. So we had talked when we wrapped up our Ahsoka discussion. Again, check those archives, check out our wall-to-wall coverage of Ahsoka Season 1. And it looks like we will continue the story where Ezra Bridger has made it back to our galaxy along with Grand Admiral Thrawn, and Ahsoka and Sabine and Huang are trapped in another galaxy with Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati and all the gang. So there will be a Season 2, so some of those unresolved storylines and threads will probably get further stitching. So that's pretty exciting. It was also announced that Jon Favreau, who along with Dave Filoni has been sort of guiding the televised side of Star Wars since Disney Plus launched 4 short years ago in 2019. Mr. Favreau will be doing a big screen Star Wars adventure, right now tentatively titled The Mandalorian and Grogu, and spoiler, we'll explain what Grogu means as we move further into our discussion. But in any event, it is big screen, it is big excitement, and it jumps to the front of the line for Star Wars features to return to the big screen. As of now, it is tentatively, I have seen a schedule of December 19th, 2025, which would be next Christmas season. The only thing that could prevent that, besides a lengthy post-production schedule, or God help us, more labor unrest in the Hollywood community, is that Avatar 3 from James Cameron is also slated to premiere on December 19th, 2025. Disney will release both The Mandalorian and Grogu and Avatar 3. So I don't think they're going to cannibalize each other, and I think one of them will probably move. Looking at James Cameron's recent history, it's a good bet Avatar might shift because he likes to take his time and spend lots of money. But Star Wars could also move into 2026, or it could even move forward if they wrap it up there. So what this all means, council members, and what I'm looking for some quick feedback on, are we excited about an Ahsoka 2? Are we excited about a big screen Mandalorian picture, keeping in mind that Dave Filoni's wrap-up of the, quote, Mandoverse saga is still ticketed, but it can't really be released until we get another season or two of these shows, including the still-to-be premiered Skeleton Crew with Jude Law that's supposed to debut later this summer. So the Mandoverse that wraps up all the storylines, the basically unofficial heir to the Empire, if you will, that's on the books. But then Jon Favreau will write and direct and jump the line for his own picture. A big screen sci-fi western adventure with our favorite characters, possibly more. An Ahsoka Season 2. Gentlemen, what murmurings on the Jedi Council?
I'm thrilled. I mean, I think they're putting their two best feet forward and jumping in the way they should. Ahsoka was brilliant. You can check out our reviews of that series, of course, like you said. Hit that subscribe button. Don't forget the notification button to make sure that you're getting up to date on all of our latest releases as well. But yeah, I really look forward to Ahsoka Season 2. I think that's more exciting to me than a big screen picture being announced, because I have to wait for that. And that's going to take a little bit longer and be a one-shot kind of deal. But I'm very excited to see Mando and Grogu and their hijinks, whatever they put together. I'm hoping it's aggressive. Like, I hope it has a huge scope and sets up the future of, you know, what we're going to see in the Star Wars universe. I think there's a lot of potential there, of course. I really hope that they don't do anything too fancy and they try to keep it very focused, like The Mandalorian is, and we'll talk about in these and future episodes as well. I would really like to see, and this may be an unpopular opinion, but I would really like to see Gina Carano come back to the series. I know Disney likes to avoid controversial opinions, and I don't agree with Gina Carano's opinion she expressed necessarily, although I do feel quite strongly that everybody has a right to express opinions. Also, while I believe opinions should have consequences on occasion, I'm trying to be very equivocal here and on the level. But I think everybody has a right to make money, too, and I think she did a fantastic job, as we'll talk about in today's episode and future episodes. And I loved her character, frankly. I really think she did a nice job coming out of UFC, so can't wait to talk about our first meeting with her in the second episode today. But I think she could really lend herself to a big screen, Western-style. I'd love to see like a Magnificent Seven type Mandalorian movie, or a Tombstone type where there's real stakes, and maybe we lose a major character or two. Not that I want to see any of them get killed, of course, but those are the kinds of things that have power in films, and we saw that to some extent with even The Last Jedi, and the three sequels that I didn't necessarily care for totally, but I think they did a few good things, and the way they gave Princess Leia kind of her send off with what they had to work with, of course. I thought that was really well done. Could have been done better, but you only have so many options when you have an actual actor pass away. You also only have so many options when you have to sort of play with what you have on film too, and the writing behind it, which we will debate in a future episode, of course. That being said, I think Star Wars is unique in that, unlike another show we talk about on another podcast, you can't just kill and bring back main characters all the time. So that I think both are extremely exciting prospects and open the doors to, well, like we talk about all the time, the future of a franchise that, I think they finally settled on a formula that really works. Does it work for everybody? It's not going to. There are a lot of people out there who are malcontents or feel like Star Wars was a finished product. But let's be honest, the fandom is so, vigorous that it's never a finished product. Star Wars, Star Trek, they're always going to go on forever, whether it's novelization, comics, fan fiction, conventions. And that's a beautiful thing. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yes. So as long as everything is pointing to, I want to see them take on Thrawn together. So that's my overall, like, if there's an end game, or, sorry, bad reference, let me back up. There's an end goal. Hello. That's what you come here for at Pending Rebrand and The Graying Jedi, are comments like that. I mean, please. You're not going to find that anywhere else.
References to the Highlander are always welcome.
That's right. Or Marvel. But anyway, so what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So the idea that they're eventually going to take on Thrawn in hopefully more than one movie is my little bit of hope that I have. I'm good with that. My other thought, or something I think I would like to see, which I want to throw this back to you guys and get your opinion. Obviously C-3PO and R2-D2 are the threads throughout all the movies, even though they get progressively worse towards the end, to the point that if you could totally erase them from someone's mind using one of those things from Men in Black, I would definitely do that to the entire viewing Star Wars people out there. But would you want to see Grogu kind of be the link now going forward? So when we get the Rey series, which will be after this whole, which I hope will be a fight with Thrawn, right? When we fast forward and Rey gets her series, do you want to see Grogu still be a part of that? I kind of feel like I do, unless someone can talk me out of it. I do like the idea that there is some link going forward. It's not a Skywalker. Well, I guess Rey's not. Whatever, man. Dude, they screwed that up so bad. But anyway, would you want to see that? I mean, I do like the. By the way, Urza, I do think the Mando movie, I could see it turning into that. But I'm even wondering if that fight with Thrawn, if we take all these series and put them together, is that your, Seven Samurai Tombstone moment as well? So let's start with that. So let me back up, because I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and you guys are going to answer them. Do you want to see Grogu be a link going forward? Let's start with that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Jedi Psyllium Maas, what do you think?
I think that, and I think this has probably already been baked in from Favreau, I don't think we can expect to see fully the same cute as apple pie or a Dagobah swamp creature, the child. I don't think we'd expect to see the same version of him. So, like, for example, if you wanted to raise the stakes in a feature, he'd start speaking, and whatever that's going to sound like, and blow people's mind. And then perhaps there's a time jump in terms of the species, not necessarily his, it's his Pon farr moment, maybe you start to see him like teenage Groot all of a sudden now, where he can like jump around and fight. And I think we're going to see an evolution of Grogu. I don't want them to sacrifice what has endeared him to countless families and Disney merchandising executives. But I don't think they'll be able to lean on that just adorable, I just want to eat him up over another long, sustained stretch. I think we've had 2 or 3 seasons of that to varying degrees, and I think there's probably part of the plan. It's just, how do you present that so that the fans who have embraced and adored him don't like recoil and say, oh, I don't want him talking, I don't want to hear what he sounds like, I like the cute little baby gurgles he makes. Like, at some point it will have to take some modest step forward, or maybe a giant leap. But if he were a character that helped center and sort of hold the foundational, while there's other characters, again, does he become part of Rey's new Jedi Order? As is rumored that's what the thrust of her film will be. And speaking of which, that film was set to be one of the first ones out of the gate, but I think there's still the scripter of that film currently is trying to do a Peaky Blinders big screen film, Stephen Knight. So I think while he's jamming these 2 simultaneous things out, I think Favreau's like, hey, I'm ready to go. And in fact, maybe just taking some ideas he would have had for a potential 4th season of Mando and just reworking them to fit a bigger screen canvas. If it's me between a 4th season of Mando, or let's jump him into the big screen and start threading him through those, I'm for the latter. I'd like to see that. And I'd like you say, if you can get a big bad a la Thanos in the Marvel, Infinity War saga, or Vader in the original trilogy, and so forth, that would be something special. So that's where I am, and I'm more than encouraged, now with Filoni as chief creative officer of Lucasfilm, that those 2 have their hands on the rudder, and will be steering the ship through the usual fan-created controversies, chaoses, and Star Wars is not what it was when I was a kid, which, like I say, we could spend a whole episode doing that, but
we will.
We would probably lose, most of our graying Jedi subscribers, and thank you again, everybody, for joining us on this adventure there. So I'll throw it back to UrzaMaster for some final thoughts, and then we'll do what we actually promised we would, which was discuss this week's exciting installments of the show. Urza, any final thoughts on the movies or season?
Real quick, Urza, just real quick, because I think Jedi Master Psyllium Maas brings up a great point besides the last 2 movies in the series. But anyway, I love razzing you. I think that's been part of the brilliance of Grogu, is that he seems like this cute, cuddly little thing that you want your kids to play with like a toy, but we're seeing moments where you're like, oh, wait a second. There is power here. Maybe, I hope not on a Luke Skywalker level, I'm not going to lie. Or at least Luke Skywalker we should have had. But we're seeing some of that, right? And we're not even sure which way Grogu is going. I guess we're giving away his name, spoiler alert. We don't really know what that path is going to be, though I'm leaning towards a graying Jedi path that he might be going, or she might be going down. But I do think that's part of the brilliance of this so far, is we think he's this, we think Grogu is this cuddly being, but there's a lot of power behind it, which they continue to hint at. So that's an excellent point, as always. UrzaMaster, Grogu being the link.
Yes, I'd love to see it. That's my final thought there. I think that's a great way to move forward, and I think that really sets up your new Jedi Order in a way that will entice fans of the whole spectrum to come check it out.
Awesome. All right, well, we should be so fortunate that we would have a week chock block full of Star Wars news as we did this past week. So thanks for that. Now, turning the Wayback Machine back ever so slightly to November 22nd, 2019, which is when The Mandalorian Chapter 3, The Sin, dropped on your favorite Disney Plus streaming network. The director is Deborah Chow, and she is the first woman to direct a live-action project for the Star Wars saga. And she kept that title for all of 1 week, because in our next episode we'll discuss the second woman to direct a live-action project for the Star Wars saga. So representation, yay. But Deborah did kick through the glass ceiling, and she is a Canadian filmmaker, TV director, and screenwriter. She was known before this for doing episodes of Beauty and the Beast, The Murdoch Mysteries, and Mr. Robot. And she also helmed the 2014 television adaptation of V.C. Andrews' smutty classic, Flowers in the Attic. So they had initially done a big screen version of that in '87, and it kind of flew under the radar despite all the supermarket checkout customers who grabbed it on their way with their milk, butter, and eggs. And then they went back and flushed it out and gave it more time than a 90-minute movie, and they did a television adaptation. If you're not familiar with Flowers in the Attic, it was really big in the 1980s. Go ahead and Google it, and you might be surprised, shocked, or excited by what you find. But she did that, and she also, following her episodic work on The Mandalorian, she went on to direct all six complete episodes of the Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries, a future Graying Jedi touchstone that we will be commenting on in the weeks and months ahead. But she got to do every minute of the show that reunited Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen pre-New Hope and post-Revenge of the Sith. So look forward to that, Graying Jedi fans. It's why you want to subscribe. It's what you've come here for. And we don't want you missing out when we take the plunge with Obi-Wan Kenobi. This episode is Chapter 3, and they're chapters, right? The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, and I believe Obi-Wan. I think the Star Wars saga is divided into chapters rather than mere episodes that other shows, including the other primary one that we discuss on pending rebrand, Star Trek. I mean, they may have a serialized format from time to time, and they may have themes and emotions and characters and plot points that can string through seasons. But for the most part, they are television episodes, and a lot of them can stand apart or be watched in a vacuum, although that would be very cold. Don't do that. And you can still kind of get where they're coming from, even if you haven't been faithfully watching week in, week out. But the Star Wars storytelling is extremely serialized, like chapters in a novel or a comic book. And so that's why it feels like a seamless story, one long movie just spread out over 8 or 10 episodes a season, or chapters. And so this one feels remarkably close to the first episode, The Mandalorian, the pilot. It was shot by Greg Fraser, and he was the cinematographer for both 1 and 3, because he did most of his work on the planet of Navarro, which we revisit extensively here in this episode, The Sin. Greg Fraser, if you think some of the scenes kind of remind you of Rogue One, particularly the flashbacks to Mando's unhappy childhood, and even though we haven't gotten a full context of that, you have a lot of explosions and people running around a square and dying in traditional Star Wars deaths. He shot Rogue One, and you will recognize some visual cues from Rogue One in these sequences. But he's done more than just Star Wars projects. He's responsible for Dune, the big screen readaptation from Denis Villeneuve, Chapter 2 of which comes out in a couple of months on the big screen. He did Zero Dark 30, for Catherine Bigelow. He did the recently rebooted The Batman with Robert Pattinson. Very creepy lighting and terrific cinematography. And he did the recent science fiction film that I think will find an audience down the road. I think it's going to be one of those that as people discover it at home on streaming or in revival screenings, they may pick up more of it. The Creator, which opened last fall and dealt with mankind battling with AI. And there's a lot to unpack in that film that I think, like Blade Runner and some other films, that maybe audiences didn't quite grasp the first viewing around, but may come around and warm up to. So he's a great cinematographer, one of the best currently working in Hollywood, and we get to see his work here in these 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. So again, we've captured the child. We've taken him into custody. We've fixed the Razor Crest because the Jawas were greedy. Queel, his Ugnaught ally, has helped him rebuild the ship, and he's back on the way to finish the job and deliver his bounty to the client, once again zestfully played by documentarian and filmmaker and just all around interesting fellow, Werner Herzog. We get Carl Weathers again, and I don't know if we mentioned his character Grief Karga. Initially, the plan was to just have, like Nick Nolte voicing Queel, was to just have a puppet, costumed, CGI, however they wanted to go. They were going to make Grief Karga an alien and just have possibly Carl Weathers doing a voice for it. And they scrapped that, not due to budgetary concerns, but just because Carl Weathers is still, he may not be Action Jackson anymore, but he's still a physical presence. And he had such a blast appearing in these first season episodes, and we'll talk about all of those as they come along. But he eventually ended up becoming a behind the scenes, a director for the show. He's done at least 1 episode in the subsequent seasons, and he fell in love with the child puppet, much like Werner Herzog did. And so Carl Weathers has stepped into his role in the Star Wars saga with gusto, and is really having a blast contributing to it and so forth. And we'll celebrate his accomplishments in subsequent seasons. But he's here, and right now he's kind of a opposing force to Mando right now, and that, again, that relationship might evolve going further. We also have a character that was recently unboxed in one of our pending rebrand shorts, Paz Vizsla, and he kind of represents the other Mandalorians, which, by the way, we've seen him in the both episodes now. There he is. There's Paz with his big gun. They've taken to the shadows of Navarro. It's not that they're being necessarily hunted to extinction as the Empire did, and we'll learn more about Mandalore's tragic backstory again as we move further along. But they've taken to kind of isolating themselves, and they're down there below in the sewers and the tunnels. And you've got the armorer, who's kind of got her own smelting factory down there and is helping arm and equip both the adult Mandalorian warriors as well as the foundlings, the younglings, and everyone for the next generation. And I just love when we go down there in the shadows and so forth, and they're just kind of all standing there, fully armored, can't remove their helmets. It's not the way. It's not part of the way. It's not Mandalorian creed, but it's really lit well, and it's like, I know this might sound counterintuitive, but I wouldn't mind getting a one-room studio like down there in the culvert and just hanging out with these guys. I'd be eating alone mostly because, again, they're not going to take off their helmets for me for a midday meal. But it's great atmosphere, and that's where we meet Paz, and he's a bulky fellow, And if he took his helmet off, you'd recognize him, because the actor playing Paz is that angry bald fellow from the first episode who doesn't like that Mando, he accuses him of spilling his drink and then harasses him at the bar. He's got a bald head and a goatee, and he looks like the kind of guy you're going to get into a bar fight with, and he comes up on the short end of Mando's retaliation. I don't remember if it's a snapped wrist or snapped neck, but he gets dispatched. Anyways, that actor, he's a stuntman, and he plays Paz in costume. The voice is creator, showrunner, director, writer Jon Favreau, and he provides the voiceover for Paz, uncredited, during his appearances. So it's always good. You can recognize the voice if you're familiar with Jon Favreau from his Marvel appearances and Swingers and his big screen work, but you can definitely hear it, and it's fun to imagine that he's in the armor as opposed to the stuntman, but they together have created a memorable character there. So, gentlemen, what I wanted the council to touch on for this episode, Mando has to fight for his life once he's decided, and in a moment of conscience, that he does not want to leave the child in the client and Dr. Pershing's hands. And it's a remarkable moment, and I'd like to hear you guys discuss it in just a couple of moments. He comes to this emotional 180, and again, an actor would generally be able to emote that and show us that through their facial expressions, perhaps, or even just a haunting look in the eyes. And we don't get any of those ingredients in this show. We're looking at a mask that he can't take off. And so it's remarkable how Deborah Chow directs it, how Pedro Pascal, or whoever happens to be in the armor, we'll talk about that in a few moments, emotes it and shows us what he's thinking and feeling without being able to use most of the traditional tools that an actor or actress could use to communicate that. So it's actually, when you go back and look at it, it's some people might say like, well, they're just sitting there. Well, they're not. And it's all conveyed with the subtle, how they hold their head, or how they possibly, the body language, the posture. It's very subtle work, but it's fantastic in terms of what it's able to tell us, the audience, again, with basically their hands tied behind their back, as far as being able to present this. And you find that throughout the show. I mean, that's one of the remarkable things that they've managed to do, is to allow us to feel and emote and care about a character that remains closed off from us, both visually and emotionally, and we basically only have the voice guy stylings of Pedro Pascal to even tell us, what's going on. But we don't even need those at times, again, as he decides that, he's been paid, he can just take his next bounty and go and continue off on his world, and something freezes him. And he makes a decision that will have consequences for not just him, but the galaxy, so forth. So that was a big moment there. But I wanted to tie that in, because he has to basically then fight his way out of Navarro against Greef Karga. And it's singularly one of the coolest scenes in the first season of many, in which after he's liberated the child from the client's little seedy alcove hideout, everybody's tracking fobs all go off at once in the bar. And I mean, from Greef Kargas to everyone just sitting there muttering that why does Mando get the best jobs and the best armor and all the praise. Like, it's just a fantastic moment where everyone all of a sudden realizes the hunt is on. And they just do it with the incessant beeping of the tracking fobs and the glowing red lights. And it's, again, Deborah Chow, chef's kiss on that
So
moment.
well done.
It's just, it's like a great horror movie moment, I suppose. Just this dawning realization that everything's about to hit the fan. And so I love that moment. But my big point to you two is he gets to use his whole arsenal, right? I mean, he's got his disruptor rifle, he's got all of those, tools of a Mandalorian and so forth, in addition to his physicality and his wits. And so I ask you, the question, gentlemen, is what is your favorite Mandalorian, weapon or defense? Because we basically get to run the gamut here with these as he's, trying to save the child and get off Navarro alive. Pick your favorite. And if somebody picks your favorite, pick another one. Pick your second favorite. And I'll let you guys go first there, because he's got plenty to dispatch with, and they're also darn cool. And it's kind of what we wish Boba Fett would have been able to show us, perhaps, in the original trilogy. So you guys run with your favorite Mandalorian weapon / defensive tool.
You want to talk about anticipation payoff, like a Rocky Horror Picture Show moment. This is it, man. This is the Boba Fett we always wanted to see. So to see Mando out there, I'm going to go simple. I love the flamethrower. I mean, I know we get to see it pretty early on, but that thing is just badass. I mean, it is so freaking cool. I mean, just a blaster pistol on Mando is cool, but like there's something about a flamethrower, and maybe this is a masculine thing, but it just gets the blood pumping, and you're like, yeah, and that's just like that's very basic in his arsenal, and uses it all the time. We see an impressive showcase, but I always wanted to see this. Like, I wanted to see Boba Fett blast himself out of the Sarlacc pit. I wanted to see all that stuff in the original movies, especially in Episode 6, or I think we were all thirsting for an Episode 7 where we could see a little more of that kind of stuff, a direct continuation. Of course, we didn't get that, but this is that moment. I think that every original series Star Wars fan was like, oh, finally, we get to see this. And this is not the only time we get to see something like this. The great shootout at the OK Corral, everything about this episode was just so well done. And yeah, the moral dilemma, the struggle of not leaving the child with, I guess might as well just say it, the Imperial Remnant. That's looking to exploit the child in whatever way. I mean, powerfully acted. Just everything about the way this episode's put together, the way it's lit, the subtlety of the acting, the turning of the helmet, and most, like you said, most of the time we can see this play out on an actor's face. In a Star Trek episode, you see this play out on the face of Captain Pike or Una Chin Riley, or somebody is struggling morally with the choice they have to make, and it weighs so heavily. Even in the economy of a streaming show, where you only get so many words and so much screen time, to do it with even less is just that much more impressive. And then, of course, you get to back it up with all these cool gadgets and gizmos, and that's just exciting to me. It's like watching BattleBots and Shakespeare in one. Loved it. Loved every second of it.
Yeah, I think they were called whistlers. Is that what those things were called? That
Whistling birds?
Yeah. It reminds me of, again, I know I've referenced the NES, or Super NES Star Wars games, and there was always a blaster you could pick up that would hone in on the bad guys, and I would keep that thing. I would never level up the blaster beyond that, because it would seek out all the enemies everywhere, and it was more impressive than just getting more damage out of it. So it reminded me of that it could just seek out the enemies and take them out. But the one thing too that I love seeing established is the line, "This is the way," and it becomes so central. But and it's, I think, a perfect representation of what the Mandalorian are about, right? They're always going to follow that, and to me, it's right up there with "So Say We All" from Battlestar Galactica. That line that no matter when it's said, it carries so much impact with it. Like, you understand the gravity of the situation or the importance of it by putting that line in there, right? You got Mando, and go ahead, say it. Go ahead.
Where does it stack up against May the Force Be With You?
Ooh.
I'm going to throw this out here.
To me,
I
the
think
way
it has
so,
more impact.
I do too, because May the Force Be With You, to me, it's like the joke that we make all the time at the end, where it's made, and also with you. To me, there's a religious, well, I guess this is the way it has a religious connotation behind it as well, but I feel like May the Force Be With You is thrown around a lot more and is used amongst everyone, versus This Is the Way is central to everything that the Mandalorian believes in, where you or I could say May the Force Be With You, and we're not Jedi, it really doesn't hold that much weight.
Like Han Solo.
Yeah, exactly, right? And here it's central to everything that the Mandalorian do. So I think, I agree with you. I think it's heavier in
This
that
is the way.
sense. Yeah, and it's more important. So I think that's great. And I also love when Mando walks back in to me a hive of villainy, when he walks back in to see Carl Weathers, but he's got all his new Beskar armor on, and everyone's like, "Wait, look at this guy!" Right? I mean, he just comes strutting in like that. He looks so suave. It was so worth it to see something like that. And again, like we referenced, the idea of no facial expressions, but he goes to reach for the knob and it's not there, and that was the proverbial nail in the coffin. He had to go back. At that point he had to go back for him. And what I loved about the sequences that we're talking about when he goes back and actually gets him, it's like we said, it's everything we want Boba Fett to be. Like that's what we've been expecting. It's very similar to when we see Luke Skywalker, spoiler alert, down the line. That's Luke Skywalker we always wanted. I mean, I remember talking with several of, I think I actually spoke with both of you and a few other people about it. Like, that's it. This is what a Mandalorian should be. This is why they're so revered and probably feared at the same time, that he could walk into that facility and just take out all those people and take what he wants. I think that was incredibly important to establish that idea too. I feel like we get a lot of those things out of this episode. A lot of that mythos that we talked about before. We're seeing a lot of it getting set up, or in a sense, maybe being continued on in this episode.
And I will round off our discussion. I like his high tension cable that he can shoot out. Boba tried to use that on Luke as the great battle over the pit of Carkoon, and Luke managed to disable it rather swiftly. But here we've seen it drag a poor Quarren into a closing door, and then presumably split that Quarren into two in the first episode. It's just a great restraint, and it shoots out, and it's kind of got that Batman feel, the grappling hook type. So again, I'm going old school, but it's like, if that thing shot out and grabbed my blaster hand and yanked it so that I couldn't shoot him, or immobilized me long enough to neutralize the threat. So, and we haven't even brought up the disruptor rifle, which not only you can use to eavesdrop as a very sensitive mic, that can penetrate solid walls and eavesdrop on conversations, but it can turn a poor Jawa or an unlucky bounty hunter into smithereens with just a poof in a violent but bloodless Star Wars fashion. And this episode, even more so than when he was trying to zap the Jawas or fighting off Trandashans in the previous episode, it does play like a horror picture, as the stormtroopers, 2 by 2 are stabbed, they're set on fire, they're blasted, they're cabled. He just picks them off, like John Rambo in the woods in First Blood. And again, it's not so violent that you have to send the kids out of the room. In fact, there's literally no blood at all, but the intensity of it is striking. It is a little bit different than how George Lucas would have, had presented it in his works and so forth. Again, there's a muscularity to it. There's a viscerality that gets the blood pumping and so forth, and you want to play the video game and do those things to those poor stormtroopers and so forth, whose aim is still terrible. by the way. They really need to get those guys out to the range and work on that there. So, and we finish with the Mandalorians exposing themselves. No, not like that. They come out of the culvert and provide the cover fire necessary for Mando to get to his ship, where originally they were planning on terminating Grief Karga, but they added the sequence in where we discover that his payment saved his life and allowed for future returns of the character. And I think the series and Carl Weathers were both happy that happened. So it went from just dispatching a guest star after a couple of appearances into something with more longevity and more nuance, as we'll see. So that was the sin, and it ends with the Mandalorian seeing Paz Vizsla shooting through the clouds with his jetpack, and one of the great lines of the episode. I got to get one of those, and so that was a great way to kick that off. And so what we did is then that kind of, at least for season 1, and a little bit of season 2, I suppose, it kind of kicks off what the model of the show was originally intended to be, which was a more of a, episode. It's chapter 4, if you will, Sanctuary, which aired on November 29th, 2019. But the idea was that he would go from planet to planet or situation to situation, much like, the A-Team used to take on a new hard luck case every week and defeat the bad guys and then hightail it out of town. And that was kind of part of the whole creation of the show and what they wanted it to be. So Sanctuary, chapter 4, is kind of the first real expression of that. It's not so serialized per se. We still have plot threads lurking in the background, particularly at the climax of this episode. But for the most part, it is meant to sort of just be, here's a new Mando adventure in a world, the planet Sorgan, which we have yet to visit, and looks like a peaceful, idyllic burg. It's a little amusing because this is also the episode that we introduce, as Jedi Master UrzaMaster mentioned, Gina Carano. We'll talk about her. We'll talk about her contributions to this episode in a few moments. But it's funny how once Mandalorian and Child arrive and they meet Gina Carano's character, Cara Dune, apparently even a backwater planet like that, it's not big enough for the both of them. And you just kind of scratch your head and say, really? I mean, it looks so darn wooded and secluded, she couldn't just, hang out over there at that lake, and he couldn't take refuge in the woods, and never the twain shall meet. But nevertheless, it looks like a great place to visit. It's not fully Endorian. That's not Andorian, it's Endorian. It does have a forest and woods and so forth, but you can see the differences in foliage and what Sorgan is all about there. So it's not an environment we haven't seen before in Star Wars, but it's presented in a way that still makes it feel like everything else. I mean, we are limited, to what we can manage here on good old planet Earth as to what we can, have them do. You can be on a water world or a desert world or an ice world or a forest world and so forth. But there are enough variations that you feel like you're seeing something new. The two episodes that we're talking about today, The Sin and Sanctuary, were both written by Jon Favreau, showrunner and co-creator, and they're all solo writing credits, so even if there were some unnamed contributions there, he's taken there. And now we have the second female director of a Star Wars live-action project, Bryce Dallas Howard. And this is the daughter of Ron Howard, and I know I've shared this story with you before, and I'll do it in 20 seconds here. My family had the privilege of being cast, all of us, in fact, as extras in Ron Howard's Backdraft, which shot in Chicago in the summer of 1990, was released in Memorial Day weekend 1991, and is a terrific firefighting picture. And Donald Sutherland doesn't look a day younger than he does in the Hunger Games trilogy. So the man is either ageless or I want what he's having. But Bryce Dallas Howard, who was by then still just a pup, probably 10 years old or even younger, she appears in a retirement party scene about a third of the way through the picture, and it's my brother Alec who got the prime camera setup that allowed him to interact with Bryce in that scene. So he's still got the best big screen moment of the Campbell family, and he's interacting with Bryce, and they're just yakking it up at a banquet table in downtown.
I got
Chicago.
it right here. I'm gonna send it to UrzaMaster. Anyway, go ahead. I found it on YouTube.
So that's my 1 degree of separation from Bryce Dallas Howard. I'm looking forward to the time when I can say, you and my brother shared some screen time in Backdraft and clock her reaction. But she did start as an actress, and in fact it was M. Night Shyamalan who actually gave her break, casting her in both The Village in 2004 and Lady in the Water in 2006. And you can debate where those fall on the M. Night Shyamalan firmament, but she did get the leads in those 2 projects. She then catapulted to Gwen Stacy in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. She was Kate Connor in Terminator Salvation, and she was Victoria in the Twilight Saga Eclipse. And then most recently, she did a trio of Jurassic World pictures with Chris Pratt. So you've seen her, and she's actually appearing later this spring, actually next month, in Matthew Vaughn's Argylle, playing a novelist who gets swept up off her feet into the world of espionage. It's a cute trailer if you want to Google it. And she's directed at least...
And lest we forget, she also played Elton John's mom in Rocketman.
Ah, there you go. Elton John's mom. My apologies to Taron Egerton and all of the Rocketman fans, which was a great biopic of the bespectacled one, and certainly worthy of your time, if not for the stunning soundtrack that they used throughout. So she directed an episode in each season. This is her season 1 contribution. And she's also directed an episode of The Book of Boba Fett, which we will be discussing in between seasons 2 and 3 of The Mandalorian, because quite frankly, that's where those belong. And she's directing an upcoming episode of Skeleton Crew, the Jude Law show that we'll be talking about on the Graying Jedi. And this episode was loosely inspired by Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai from 1954, and The Magnificent Seven, the Americanized remake with Steve McQueen and Yul Brynner in 1960. The idea, and it's become a trope and a favored tradition. The plucky villagers who aren't really ready to defend themselves fall afoul of some marauders or bandits who will take what they want when they want it. And so the villagers then go out and hire help to defend them, but really discover that they had it in them all along. And with the help of the mercenaries that they've selected, eventually triumphed over the bad guys and learn to stand on their own 2 feet. This episode is notable because it's the first one that Pedro Pascal cannot tell you what he was doing on the set because he wasn't on the set. He had a previous commitment to perform King Lear on Broadway, and so he was unavailable for the shooting of this episode. And so as a result, his stunt doubles are Who's Under the Armor the entire show, and then he provided the voiceovers in post-production. So you're not seeing Pedro Pascal in this episode, and that's going to be the case as we move later into the show for various reasons going forward. But for this one, don't accost him at a fan convention and say, so what were your memories of Sanctuary? Because A, he'll think that you've spent way too much time watching The Mandalorian, and B, he won't be able to give you any satisfactory one, at least on the set. I love, again, is this Jurassic World or just intuitive filmmaking. I love the personification of the ATST Scout Walker as a dinosaur, complete with glowing red eyes and the famous rumblings and puddles trembling and so forth. So that's either Bryce Dallas Howard having fun with her latest role, or it made sense for the narrative, but I love that. I'm going to spread it out for you guys. Jedi Master UrzaMaster talked about Cara Dune, and I want him to expound a little bit on that Rebel shock trooper. But she obviously makes an impact. My favorite moments with the child, including meeting his very first loth cat, a species of animal we've seen in Ahsoka, and then just sipping a cup of bone broth. Just an adorable. I have a Funko Pop commemorating that sequence where, after a particularly brutal introduction between Cara Dune and the Mandalorian, they both turn and react to seeing the child just happily sipping his broth. Like, what's next? And that triggers Mando's line, again, delivered dryly by Pedro Pascal. You want some soup? It's just his vocal delivery, even if that's all he contributed to this episode, and just that dry, you can find wit, you can find grit, you can find tension, you can find exasperation. Like, what he's not able to do with his face, he's able to do with his voice and his vocal readings, and that alone would put him at the pedestal for, the acting accolades that he deserves for his contributions to this show. It turns out the child likes frogs. That's a recurring motif that we'll see here. And we had Julia Jones playing the village mom who befriends the Mandalorian and almost convinces him to abandon the way and his path. And you've probably seen her. She just recently popped up in Marvel's Echo miniseries, and she was also a semi-regular on Showtime's Yellow Jackets. So Julia Jones is having a moment. And if you were just going to chuck the whole quest and spend it farming blue krill on Sorgan, I suppose you could think of worse people to spend the time with and enjoy that Kobachika than with her. And then we end again with the promise that even if you did want to just retire gracefully and quietly, that there will always be unrest following. And it's a great moment that you guys can talk about in terms of how it propels the show forward and allows the Mandalorian and child to further their adventures, again, with the next chapter, rather than just coming to a nice quiet conclusion and only giving us 4 chapters, which would have just really felt like a cheat after all the promise it had shown. So, gentlemen, your favorite moments of Sanctuary and anything that leaps out at mind to you with the introduction of Cara Dune and so forth.
I think Cara Dune, the whole character, was the highlight of this episode. The idea that there are these rebels that are still out there and are sort of these Ronin, right? Not unlike the Mandalorians himself, just as capable warriors, differently equipped, and just as useful. But are sort of content just being mercenaries or being, enforcers on quiet little planets, but could easily be larger contributors to whatever may come along. That, to me, Gina Carano really nails that. She comes across as physically imposing and capable, formidable, but at the same time, there's a gentleness to her and a humanity. You also get it from Mando, which is interesting. When it comes to the child, there's sort of this gentle aura that follows, the good guys that interact with it. Again, that's just supposed to be a contrast to sort of the Imperials that are chasing him down, hunting him down. But the real cool thing here is just the whole setup of, and it makes me frankly kind of upset with where the series heads post Cara Dune, because I feel like there was so much more she was capable of. And I'm hoping that, again, we see her in the future. But this episode really just kind of, it is very Seven Samurai. It's very, sort of putting the band together. And it kind of feels like the trajectory is we're building a super group. So for me, it was very exciting. And you get all of those sort of comic relief moments that are very Kurosawa. I mean, very George Lucas in a way, too. Joseph Campbell, kind of vibes where you're setting up a mythos of, is there darkness in the universe? Absolutely. But is there also humor? Of course. And that's how myth works. You have to have those relief type characters. You can't just have Hades, feuding with Zeus all the time. You've got to have a Hephaestus. You've got to have some of these other sort of tertiary characters that add flavor, even if they have their own compelling stories, which Cara Dune, of course, does. But I loved every minute of it. I think they did the exact right thing at the right time in the series to sort of have some interplay between, shall we say, arc development. This was a good sort of vehicle episode to get Mando and the child to the next phase of what was going to happen on their journey without leaving us sort of feeling like, they're just in a spaceship traveling at light speed to a certain location, and it ends up the location isn't what they expected. It's just a debris field with some small moon nearby.
I saw what you did there.
Uther, what did you think?
I liked the episode, and I'm going to tell you my one little issue with it in a second. I kind of felt like there was a little bit of a Mando, like that Mando, Mando, what's her name? O'Mara? Was that her name?
For what? The young lady?
The gal that he...
Yeah, Julia Jones, O'Mara.
Almost felt a little bit like Picard and Anij from Insurrection. It kind of had that feeling a little bit, in my opinion.
Good reference.
I do like, I think, I'm hoping that Gina Carano does come back. And again, Urza, like we've been talking about. Because back then, obviously we don't have the vision now of this all coming together and all these people hopefully playing a part in a series, in a movie series, right? But we knew we were going to wind up seeing her again. So I did like that part in the introduction of the character. I feel like that's what that episode was really about. The only... This is my only little drawback on this episode. Why didn't he just go get the Razor Crest and blow it up? That was my only thing. Now, I know you always need your montage. I know you need those scenes. I know you're always going to have an episode. I don't care what series it is. You're going to have one where... I know we keep using the reference to the A-Team as well, where like the A-Team shows up and teaches the town how to fight against, the bad guy.
The greed developer, yeah.
So... Yeah, right. So I mean, overall it's still a good episode. We get those good vibes. We see the relationship growing, obviously, between him and the child, and he's even willing to leave the child behind if that's what's best. Like he cares that much. And then obviously, we know he couldn't do it. And again, I just go get the Razor Crest and blow it up. That was my only thing. But then you don't get the montage, so I guess you can't do that. So overall, I think it was a solid episode. Overall, that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I think, gentlemen, that brings us to our lightsaber ratings for these two episodes, as we often bestow our color-coordinated feelings on these episodes, as we should search them, trust them. I defer to Psyllium Maas, Jedi Master. What ratings do you give these two episodes?
Well, I've always been accused by both present company and those in my orbit that I wear my heart and my feelings on my sleeves. So I've decided to take that metaphor literally today. As you can see, I have a green garment, which also is how I would review these two episodes, The Sin and Sanctuary. It's from another science fiction show, Stranger Things. It's a Hawkins T-shirt done in the 1980s Amblin Spielbergian style. But this one stands in today for The Mandalorian. I know it's never said on camera, but it is easily surmisable that when the child was in Dr. Pershing's care and rescued, and there appeared to be hooked up to a machine that was slowly Xeroxing him, that they were in fact harvesting midichlorians from him. And I thought the show kind of got to have its cake and eat it too, because any Star Wars fan worth his salt would have recognized that that was basically what it appeared to be happening, without overtly declaring that that's what they were up to. And I think they get away with that once more in the second season, and we'll bring that up when it comes about. But basically, a nice little subtle throwback to the prequel, and one of the more controversial Force theories of its time. But they got to sort of visualize it without really explicitly saying that's what they're doing. So I did want to throw that out there just to tweak Jedi Master, Lord Uther, and so forth. That appeared.
Then I'm going next.
Okay, and that appeared to be what they wanted the child for in the first place, was to basically suck out all of his force-bearing qualities biologically or otherwise. So 2 greens for me, friends. Emerald, and there you go.
Well, for the sin, it gets a lime and green.
A crunchy
Which
layers.
these aren't mine.
Okay.
These aren't mine. My
Okay.
son was eating them while playing Fortnite. I just want to make sure everyone knows that, because I've lost about 12 or 13 pounds so far. So I just want to point that out. I'm not eating that stuff anymore. For the next episode, The Sanctuary, it gets an R2D2 blue.
Okay.
Solid episode. Again, go get the Razor Crest, because that ship, my friends, is one of a kind. So just go get this thing and just go blow up the ATST, and then we're all good in the neighborhood of Shorewood. And last but not least, I have no problem if you're taking the kid's blood to give the Palpatine at some point, but let's leave the midichlorians out of this discussion, because of that's all I have to say about that.
Okay.
A lot of Forrest Gump references today.
I will,
But anyway,
I will fight you.
UrzaMasters of Urza, that masters all the Urzas. That is a Jedi Master as well. I would love to hear your thoughts.
I give the first episode an emerald green lightsaber. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It was the Western climax that we needed to see to close out, sort of, if we want to stick to this 3-episode arc thing that seems to work with a lot of these shows, to move us into the next phase of what Mando is going to be. I will give, actually, the following episode, let's call it a Paz Vizsla armor blue. I think it was a vehicle episode. I think there's a lot of great stuff that happened, but it felt Monster of the Week to me. Cara Dune really saves this episode. I think the introducing of that character made it more intriguing for me, and it also set up something of a history between Ronin, whether you're Mandalorian or former Rebel Alliance, that makes the galaxy a little more intriguing. And that, to me, is something you can't trade in a Star Wars, because there's just so many stories to be told, but how interconnected are they? That's always the question. And for me, that was a very interesting posit.
One quick final 20-second response. Do you want to see Gina Carano come back, or would you want to see the character of Cara Dune come back in the future, if they were able to successfully, as they may have to with Baylan Skoll in Ahsoka or otherwise? So are you specifically saying that you want her to get a redemption arc, or that you would love to see the Rebel shock trooper character that balances compassion with toughness? Just real quick,
I would love to see Gina Carano come back. I think she played the character very well. I know there's a certain line people tend to draw in Hollywood these days Although I think in reflection, things could be done in a way that allow her to come back to the series and maybe redeem herself a little bit to the company. I know business decisions are business decisions, but I really think that that was a great character. I'm also against recasting characters. As many of my fellow late 80s babies, we all grew up with Mortal Kombat Annihilation, and you just don't recast Christopher Lambert. It does not work. So with that being said, Jedi Council, I thank you again for your time. For our fans, thank you for joining us today in the Council Chambers. We will reconvene next week as we go further into the galaxy far, far away of the Mandalorian. As always, may the Force be with you.
And also with the Packers.